Hi, my name is Erica Peplinski-Burge, and today, along with my amazing colleague and friend,
JJ Morgan.
I am going to present to you, or we are going to present to you, Once Upon a Brain, the Power of Storytelling in the World Language Classroom. I am a bit obsessed with brains, but I think it's good for all teachers, all educators to know a little bit about the way the brain functions, and especially world language teachers. And the basics, the core thing you need to understand is that in our brains, we have these things called neurons and axons. And the neuron is kind of the blob in the middle of the picture right now, and the axons are those tentacly things coming off of the neuron. And what happens when we do anything is a neuron, or more likely a group of neurons, sends a signal along the axon to other neurons, and that causes us to do all the things. So if you were teaching a lesson and suddenly your principal walks in, one set of neurons would recognize a noise, another set would turn your head, another set would recall who's there, another set would respond appropriately, and because we're teachers, yet another set would be scanning the classroom, hoping all of your students look very engaged. Now, because these are things we do frequently, we're able to process these things and make them happen very, very quickly. And that's because our brain is a little bit like a muscle, and that the parts we use more frequently are faster processing and stronger. And so that's part of why it's really important that we give our students lots of repetitions when we're learning new languages or acquiring new vocabularies or starting new skills, because learning something new, like a language, actually causes our brain to create new axons between the neurons or to release chemicals that strengthen the axons that are already there. And that's really hard work for our brain and takes a lot of energy, and we don't like to do it unless we are interested in something or unless it is meaningful for us.
So what we do at Voces is we provide lots and lots and lots of repetitions in a variety of contexts. So like Erica said, those repetitions are key, but you need a compelling reason to remember a word. You need engagement with your story or with your activity before a particular student is going to acquire that word. So what we do is provide lots and lots and lots of repetitions in so many different contexts, the same structures in different contexts to enable your students to be able to find that one context that's good for them. Because what Dr. Krashen tells us is you need one good, really salient repetition of a word for it to be remembered. Well, it's hard to get that one good salient rep of a word unless you have a lot of different contexts for it to hit all of the different needs of your students.
Now, the reason it's hard to get that great repetition unless you have lots of repetitions is because all of our brains are different. All of us come from our own backgrounds, have our own histories, so no two brains are exactly alike. And so at BOCES, we try to give you lots of ways to hit those repetitions. Also, when you think about a baby learning their first language, babies have something like 10,000 hours of input before they start to output at 1 year of age. We also don't start teaching our babies to read by like reading a physics or neuroscience textbook to them. We talk to them about things that are interesting to them, like, oh, look at the kitty, hi, kitty. And we use very, very basic language because that's how our babies understand. And we do that naturally because that's how our brains naturally acquire languages. We start with individual words and phrases, and then we build to sentences and brief interactions. And then we get to paragraphs and short text, and then finally we're able to read longer text and discourse. Now, Voces is based around this way that our brains naturally acquire languages. We get our individual words and phrases in the vocabulary. We get sentences and brief interactions in the personal questions and answers. And then we get paragraphs and short text and longer text and discourses in our stories, in our mini stories, and in our cultural articles. So we take advantage of how the brain naturally acquires a language.
Okay, so we begin with key structures from any reading, any story, any piece of culture. We have key structures that are going to be used. You can teach those to your students in advance using total physical response, You can do charades, Pictionary, Book It, basically any kind of game to make it compelling. And a side note, we have recently updated all of our Book It vocabulary lists. So for every unit or chapter of a Voces textbook, we have a Book It vocabulary list to go along with it. We progress then from the key structures to personal questions and answers so that you're getting that short little interaction with students. You're using the vocabulary that you just taught and that they have recently acquired in a context that is personal to them. So you're asking them personal questions. Have you done this? Do you do this a lot or a little? In just a variety of questions and answers.
From there, we have a mini story that plays with these words, which we're not going to show you just for time. And from that mini story, we build into a bigger story that goes with all of the words and the target structures we have just used. And the ones that we just showed you go with this amazing story that is in our middle school textbook called The Heroes of the Plane. It's a really exciting story about a boy and his dad who fly tourists over the Nazca Lines, which are located in Peru, so they can see these beautiful pieces of art and history, essentially. And in the story, the boy and his dad see some tourists who are kind of trying to make their own Nazca lines, and they stop them from hurting this beautiful piece of history, and they save the day in the story. Now, the stories not only build upon the target structures and vocabulary that we've also used, but they have themes that kids can relate to, and they help the kids start to explore the world, as you see here through the Nazca Lines story. They also have native speaker audio, which you can speed up or slow down, kind of just based on the needs of your own students. And they have an exciting storyline the kids can relate to with beautiful pictures, which you can see right here. Now, these stories build right into activities. And of course, you totally could have your students go and do these activities on their own. And you'll notice in the menu here on the left, those little lightning bolts next to the activities mean they're auto-graded because we always like to save teachers time where we can. And as I said, you can do these activities on your own. You could project them and do them as a class and then have students go and do them on their own, which is just extra reading. Or I like to turn these into a game that we play as a class before I have my students do them on their own. And this activity is a true or false activity. So I just tell my students this side of the room is true, this side of the room is false. I'm going to read you a statement about the story, and I want you to just move to the side of the room that you think matches their answer. So I would read the first question to my students, and they would move to the true or false side of the room. And then with more advanced students, you can even go and ask the students why they think their answer is correct or not. You might even look at the text to verify a correct answer. So you can really do a lot with this, even though it looks like a simple true or false activity. And then I always have my students go and do it on their own at the end. The kids who are really fast readers and don't need a lot of extra work will just get through it really quickly. And the other students will really benefit from a little bit of extra reading that they've just had supported with the class activity.
An additional way that you could use this activity is a pre-reading activity. You could have students make predictions about what they're going to read, and they could move to one side of the room if they think the statement is true, and then, or if they think the statement is false. And then after you read it, you could discuss, were they correct? Did they make the right prediction? It's just tricking them into another repetition in a different context of the vocabulary structure. So the students have just read the fictional story about the Nazca Lines. We move then into the cultural connection, which talks about las líneas de Nazca, the Nazca Lines. And it gives them definitions, what they are, where they are, what they are forms of, animals, plants, objects, some are geometric. And that they don't know why they were formed, but they do know when they were formed, and following this version, version A, which is the shortest, simplest version of the reading, there is an activity that students could do to check their understanding. Then you move on to version B, which is a little bit more complex. And you'll notice there are words in blue. Any word that is in blue, students can hover over that word with their mouse, and the definition of the word will be shown to them if they are doing this individually on their screen or with a partner and looking at their screen. And then again, questions that they can answer to check their understanding from version B. Version C is the full, most detailed version of the reading. And you can see that it is longer. It has more details for them. It's very empowering for students to go from this simple version into reading the full version of it and fully understanding what the reading is about. And Erica is going to tell you about a way that she uses it for scaffolding.
Okay, so I use it two different ways for scaffolding. And one is just, when I first read these with my students, I don't show them version B or version C at first. Like I just show them version A projected on my screen. Their computers aren't even open. And the reason I do that is because if they see version C, if they see that first and they see all that Spanish there, it's going to feel really overwhelming and they might freak out and feel like they can't even do it. But if you start with version A, and then go to version B and then go to version C, you're just giving them a little more and a little more and a little more, and you've already made it very clear what's happening with version A. And so it really makes them feel confident and excited about the amount of language that they're able to comprehend at such an early stage. Now, one other way to do that is I will actually print these pages and I will have version A all by itself, version B all by itself, and version C all by itself. And I will give these to students based on their levels. And this is really nice because it's a leveled reader without you having to do all the work of leveling the reader. And then each student can read about the exact same thing, but at the level that they are actually at. So no one's going to feel overwhelmed. No one's going to feel like, oh, it's too easy. They're going to get the level that matches their reading ability in the target language. Now, I have done the version A, B, and C thing where I have it printed and cut out for my students, and I have told them, here are 3 different versions of this article. Pick the one that's going to be best for you. And I also found that students were really, really good at self-scaffolding and knowing which article was going to be best for them. And they were really motivated to dive into the reading when they were self-selecting. So depending upon your students, that's another way that you could use this excellent resource.
Okay, we also, in every unit, have a panorama. So they've read a fictional story about the Nazca lines. They have read the cultural connection about the Nazca lines, and now they can see the area of Peru where they actually occur. And this is a 360 panorama.
Panorama.
Yeah, it's a 360 panorama. And you can just talk about the picture. You can do picture talk. You can ask students to do see, think, wonder. So what do they see? They can write down a list or sentences. What do they think about what they see? And what questions do they have about what they see? Just about anything that you can do with a picture, you can also do with a panorama.
I also love to do I Spy with those panoramas or 20 questions with more advanced students. So you can play games with them too. Up next, or more likely to be used at the end of the chapter after students have read a few more stories, we have integrated performance assessments. We do have all modes, reading, speaking, and writing and listening built into these IPAs, and they're a way that students can apply everything they've learned in the chapter in a real life context. Now, sometimes IPAs can be a little overwhelming for students at first. So within Voces, we have a very handy guide about how to scaffold your students up to IPAs. We cannot dive into it right now, but we also have videos you could watch about how to scaffold students up to be successful at IPAs, which will also subsequently make them successful at using Spanish in the world, but also on any upcoming tests they might have. Placement tests specifically.
So why do we focus so much on stories at Voces? Why do we think that is so important? Well, the reason is because humans are storytellers. Stories transmit information. They share histories. They teach important lessons. Before there was the written word, there was the spoken word. And that's how we passed our history down. It is still how we pass our history down. We open up a scrapbook and we show pictures of grandma and grandpa or great grandma and grandpa, and talk about who those people are. And we talk about stories. We give our children stories about them. Or we turn to a page in the scrapbook where our child was 2 and we talk all about the situations around the taking of that photograph that you're looking at when they were 2. And you tell a story about that. And eventually your child can tell their own story about, well, this is me when I was 2 and I was doing, and it's because you gave them that history. Humans are storytellers. We go to work and on Monday, we talk about what we did over the weekend. We tell stories about it. We, on Friday, meet with our friends at work and talk about what we're going to do. So stories, stories, stories. And the beautiful thing is that recent research shows us that the listener's brain synchronizes with the storyteller's brain. There is a true, literal biochemical connection between the listener and the storyteller. So story after story after story, what you're really doing with your students is building community, building connection, building an environment that is safe where they can learn and they can acquire a language.
Now, if any of this was interesting to you, and we hope that it was, and you want to dive in more, we have an amazing resource in Voces. It is open to any and all people, Voces subscribers and non-Voces subscribers alike, and it is called the Hub. And in the Hub, we dive into the science of ADI, so we really get into all the brain stuff. We have self-guided training tutorials where you can learn about how to do personalized questions, answers, or you can learn how to work with a picture or work with a story. And then we have extension ideas. Like if you're doing a story, you could do this, 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 and this. If you're doing a picture in class, you could try this, 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 and this. This is free and open to all and everyone. Some districts are even using it for their training for the year. And to access this resource, you just go to vocesdigital.com. Click on support at the top of the screen, click on training and instructional support, and look at the self-paced options. It is completely free. You just need an email, no credit card required, to subscribe. And again, it is vocesdigital.com.
Hey, so finally, we're here to help. If you have questions, you want a deeper dive, you just want to have a conversation about language acquisition, Eric and I are here. Send us an email and we'll be happy to have that conversation with you.
And we're going to end with one of my favorite quotes on education. Education is the kindling of a flame, not the filling of a vessel. Socrates. We hope we have given you a few ideas that are going to support you in your mission to kindle lots of flames and get kids excited about language learning. And we thank you for your time and just for all the amazing things you are doing for your students in your classrooms.
Bye, thank you.